The morning we dropped Ryan off at the recruiting station, I felt proud and hollow at the same time. He was our youngest, the last kid still at home. Watching him board that white bus toward Fort Leonard would made something settle heavy in my chest. Laura wiped a tear and smiled like it was no big deal, like sending off your baby to basic training was normal. And I guess it was. Still, I kept my hand on her shoulder as we stood in that parking lot longer than anyone else. My name's Ethan Marshall. I'm 52, born and raised in Red Bluff, California. I've been working as a mechanic since I was 20, same shop, same routines. Laura, my wife of 27 years, has been a dental assistant nearly as long. And now, after raising 3 boys who were finally off living their own lives, we were officially empty nesters. I thought it was the start of something good. That same afternoon, I went online and booked a weekend up in Mount Shasta, just a budget lodge with an old hot tub and decent mountain views. I figured we could use some alone time. The kind we hadn't had in years without one of the boys barging in or needing a ride or asking if there was more milk. We need this, I told her over dinner that night. Just you and me. Like old times. Laura nodded, but her eyes didn't light up the way I expected. She pushed peas around her plate and said, "That's nice." She'd been distracted lately, but I chalked it up to nerves about Ryan leaving. I figured once we were in that little lodge, curled up with some wine and no schedule, things would shift back. 3 days before the trip, she sat me down at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something," she said, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. "I applied for a certification program in medical imaging. 6 months. In Kelowna." Kelowna. That was in British Columbia. I blinked. "You mean, out of state?" She nodded. "Out of country, technically." "You already applied?" "I got in," she said, her voice tightening. "Starts next month." The air between us felt suddenly too still. "I didn't even know you were thinking about leaving the clinic." She gave a little shrug like she was trying to act casual. "It's time for a change. I'm tired of cleaning teeth and being told to scoot closer every day by some old man with coffee breath. This program's a real chance to do something better." I didn't know what to say. I stared at her, trying to catch up. I'd been planning a weekend to rekindle us, and she'd been planning to leave. She must have read the look on my face because she softened her voice. "Look, I know it's sudden, but it's only 6 months. And it could mean better pay, more freedom. For both of us." "For both of us?" I said slowly. "Laura, when were you going to tell me?" She crossed her arms, defensive now. "Don't make this about you. I didn't ask for permission because it's something I need. For once." I opened my mouth, then closed it. She reached across the table, touched my hand lightly. "You've always wanted to fix things. This isn't something you need to fix. It's just a door I need to walk through. Please support me in that." And there it was. I nodded eventually, told her I was happy for her. But deep down, it felt like something had already shifted. Like she'd already stepped out that door. I still packed our bags for the trip that Friday. We still went. We even had a nice dinner by the lake. But the silence between us that night felt less like comfort and more like a waiting room, something temporary, something cold. In my head, I kept hearing her say for once, like I'd been the one keeping her small. I guess I'd hoped the next chapter would bring us closer. Instead, it felt like she'd already started writing hers without me. Laura left early. I helped her load the last of her suitcases into the back of the lift and watched her go with barely more than a side hug and a quick, "I'll call you tonight." She didn't even look back. I stood on the porch a long while after the car disappeared. Just me, the sound of morning sprinklers, and the mailbox flag still up because I'd forgotten to check it yesterday. The quiet in the house was immediate and sharp. No clatter of coffee cups. No blow dryer humming in the bathroom. Just the buzz of the fridge and the ache of being left behind. At first, I tried to stay positive. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd call every night and tell me about her classes and we'd laugh and count down the days together. I kept my phone next to me at all times on the couch, in the garage, even while brushing my teeth. The first night, she FaceTimed me from her little rented room. She smiled, gave me a quick tour, said she was tired but excited. By the third night, the calls were already shorter. "Sorry," she'd say, glancing off screen. "So much coursework. Let's talk tomorrow, okay?" But tomorrow started getting pushed. A week later, I got a text at 11:13 p.m. "Can't talk tonight. Midterm review group went long. Love you." No call. No voice. Just 3 lines and a period that felt like a full stop. I kept trying. I'd leave voicemails in the evenings, telling her about my day. Dumb little things, The new guy at the shop accidentally rotated a customer's tires without tightening the lug nuts, or how I finally fixed the leaky faucet she always hated. I even tried watching our old show, some cop drama she loved to mock, hoping we could text about it, keep the rhythm. She never responded. One night, I reheated some leftover chili and sat in front of the TV with my bowl on my lap and our show on mute. But it wasn't the same without her sarcastic commentary. I found myself turning to say something and catching only silence. That's when I started writing things down. Not for her. For me. Just a regular spiral notebook, something I'd used at work to track inventory. I flipped to the first page and wrote. Day 9. Laura didn't call again. Starting to feel like I live alone. I didn't expect it to help. But it did. A little. Writing gave the loneliness somewhere to land. Because saying it out loud would have made it too real. Saying, I miss her, or she didn't think to include me, would have been admitting that maybe I'd never been part of the decision in the first place. And that maybe, just maybe, she didn't miss me the way I missed her. That thought sat heavier than any silence. Heavier than the empty side of the bed. Heavier than the half-used toothpaste tube sitting on the counter, exactly where she left it. It was like our life had been on autopilot for so long, I didn't notice she'd already unbuckled and stepped out. And I was still sitting there, waiting for someone to hit the brakes. It was Martin who pulled me out of the rut. He used to work with me at the shop before he took early retirement and started fixing up motorcycles for fun. I hadn't talked to him in months, but one Saturday afternoon, he just showed up in my driveway like it was nothing. You look like hell, he said, leaning against his truck. Come grab a beer. I almost said no. I was halfway through cleaning out the garage, a project I started more to keep my hands busy than anything else, but I didn't have it in me to make an excuse. So I wiped the grease from my fingers and followed him to a little bar tucked behind a bowling alley on Main Street. The kind of place that smelled like stale popcorn and cheap whiskey and hadn't updated its jukebox since 2004. There was a poker night going on in the back room. 5 or 6 guys from around town, some of them familiar faces, a couple I didn't know. Martin slapped a cold beer in my hand and pulled me toward the table. Ethan here used to clean me out every Friday night, he said with a grin. But he still got the touch. I didn't. But nobody seemed to care. We played a few hands, drank a few beers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that comes out of your chest before you can stop it. That's when I noticed the woman across the room watching me. She wasn't dressed like the others. Simple jeans, a soft gray sweater. Brown hair tucked behind her ears. She wasn't flashy, but there was something about her, something grounded. Her eyes didn't dart around like she was scanning the room for someone better to talk to. They just landed on me and stayed. Martin nudged me. She's been staring since we walked in, he said under his breath. You're still a decent-looking guy, Ethan. Don't act so surprised. I snorted. She's probably trying to figure out if I'm divorced or just sad. He grinned. Either way, she's coming over. And she was. She walked up with a calm, quiet confidence, holding a glass of red wine and a half-smile. Mind if I join you? I stood politely, gesturing to the open chair beside me. Not at all. I'm Rachel, she said. My cousin owns the bar. I usually avoid poker night, but you looked like someone who could use a break. Ethan, I said, shaking her hand. And yeah, I guess I could. She didn't flirt. Not in the way I expected. No touching my arm or tossing her hair. Instead, she asked how long I'd been working in town. If I always looked this tired. That made me chuckle. Empty house, I said. Wife's off on some course in another province. Son just left for basic. Whole house feels like a motel now. Real quiet. Too quiet. Her expression shifted. Not pity. Just recognition. I know that feeling, she said softly. My kids are grown. My ex moved to Oregon. Some nights, I think the silence might swallow me whole. We talked for almost an hour. About everything and nothing. About how grocery shopping feels strange when you're only buying for one. About how people don't talk to each other anymore unless they want something. About how even the strong ones, especially the strong ones, get tired of being alone. When she finally stood to leave, she said, It was good talking to you, Ethan. Real good. I watched her walk away, then looked down at my beer. Still half full, but something in me felt different. Lighter. Not fixed, not even close. But seen. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't go home dreading the quiet. I went home wondering if I might hear from her again. Rachel called me 2 days later. I was in the middle of checking a civic suspension when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but something told me to answer. Ethan, she said, once I picked up. Hope this isn't weird. I just figured I'd see if you wanted to grab a coffee sometime. I wiped my hands on a towel and leaned against the shop wall. It's not weird, I said. It's nice. We met at a cafe off East Avenue the next evening. Nothing fancy, just 2 chipped mugs and a booth with squeaky vinyl. She ordered tea. I stuck to black coffee. We talked like old friends. No pretending. No small talk. Just easy conversation, the kind you fall into like a warm coat. It didn't take long for me to open up. I don't think she misses me, I said after a long pause. Laura, I mean, some days it feels like she's already gone. Not just for the course. I mean gone. Rachel nodded slowly, her hands wrapped around her mug. That's how it starts, she said. At least it was for me. She told me her story in pieces. Her ex-husband, Jeff, had been a kind man. At first. But over the years, the kindness turned into routine. The routine turned into distance. Until one day, he packed a bag and said, I don't think I'm happy anymore. He didn't cheat. He didn't yell. He just left, she said, staring out the window. And the thing is, I didn't fight him. I didn't even cry until 2 weeks later. That's how numb I was. I sat with that for a minute. That's what scares me, I said. Not that Laura's leaving, but that maybe she already left. Months ago. And I didn't notice. Rachel looked at me. Really looked. Ethan, I don't know your wife. But I know that look in your eyes. I had it for years. You're not broken. You're lonely. She reached into her purse and pulled out a little notebook. I've been journaling too, she said. Just scribbles, mostly. But it helps. Makes the silence less loud. I smiled. Me too. Started about 2 weeks ago. Mostly me complaining to myself. But yeah, it helps. Complaining's honest, she said. We're allowed that. We sat in silence for a bit. Not awkward silence. Comfortable. Like neither of us needed to fill the space with noise. When she left that night, she squeezed my hand. Not romantic. Not flirty. Just human. And that touch stayed with me longer than I expected. That night, I wrote in my notebook. Rachel sees me. Not just my face. Not just my work. But me. And for the first time since Laura left, I let myself wonder if maybe being seen was more important than being loved. Because love can fade. But to be understood? That sticks. It was a Tuesday morning when I booked the ticket. I didn't tell Laura I was coming. I just packed a small bag, called off work, and caught the first flight to Kelowna. I had convinced myself it was a grand gesture. A chance to surprise her, remind her of what we had. Maybe the distance was getting to her too. Maybe she just didn't know how to say it. When I knocked on the door of her apartment building, I felt like a teenager again, nervous, hopeful, rehearsing lines in my head. She took almost a full minute to answer. When the door cracked open, she looked stunned. Not happy. Not angry. Just stunned. Ethan, she said, her hand still on the door. I smiled, holding up a small grocery bag. Brought your favorite trail mix. She didn't laugh. Just opened the door wider and stepped aside. Well, you flew all the way up here. Figured I owed you a visit, I said. It's been what, 7 weeks? 8, she corrected softly. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, bland furniture, a couple of textbooks open on the kitchen table. A sweater I didn't recognize draped over the back of a chair. She hovered near the door like she wasn't sure if she should let herself sit. Did I catch you at a bad time? I asked. No, she said, after a pause. I was just heading out to study, but it's fine. We ended up going to a small bistro nearby. She picked at a salad, barely touched her wine. Her phone buzzed more than once. I pretended not to notice. So, I said, trying to keep things light, any wild Canadian adventures? She gave a half smile. Not really. Mostly just study groups and lectures. You seem distracted, I said finally. She looked up, lips parted like she was about to lie, then shut her mouth again. It's been a lot. Intense. I nodded. That's fair. Just, I don't know. I hope we could reconnect a little. She looked at me then, really looked. Ethan, she said softly, this life, it's different. The people here, the pace of everything. It's like I stepped out of who I used to be. I swallowed. And who were you with me? She looked down at her plate. Comfortable. Predictable. After dinner, we went back to her apartment. She poured herself another glass of wine, slipped off her shoes, and leaned against the counter. I didn't expect you to come, she said, eyes avoiding mine. I know. We kissed in the hallway. Her lips were warm, but her hands were shaky. When we stumbled toward the bedroom, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a hotel you can't sleep in. She was different. Bolder. Wilder. Not the woman I'd shared a quiet bed with for 27 years. She kissed like a stranger, touched me like someone trying to forget something. And then, a knock. Loud. Impatient. Laura froze. Another knock. Then a female voice, slurred but angry, opened the damn door. Laura. I know he's in there. My heart stopped. Laura stumbled out of bed, grabbed her robe, and disappeared into the hallway. I stood there, half naked, listening. Muffled voices. Arguing. I heard my name. And then silence. When she came back in, she didn't meet my eyes. I think. Maybe it's better if you get a hotel tonight, she whispered. I nodded. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't have to. I didn't sleep much that night. The hotel room was clean and plain, but nothing felt real. I laid on top of the comforter with my shoes still on, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me. I kept hearing that voice at the door, young, female, angry. I kept seeing the way Laura looked when she came back in the room. Not guilty, not devastated, just cornered. By morning, I'd stopped lying to myself. She wasn't studying with that woman. She wasn't out building a future for us. She'd left me months ago and just hadn't had the courage to say it. I packed up, grabbed a cab, and took the next flight back to California. No note, no confrontation, just silence. The kind I'd been living in for weeks anyway. The house was exactly the same when I got home, except quieter. Even the air felt thinner. I stood in the doorway a long while, staring at the couch where we used to fall asleep watching reruns. The kitchen light blinked slightly. I didn't bother fixing it. Instead, I poured a glass of water, went upstairs, and opened the drawer with all our bank files. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just got to work. I started moving our joint savings into a separate account. I called our lawyer, the one who handled the boys' college funds, and asked for a referral for divorce proceedings. I sat on hold for 20 minutes, then calmly scheduled a consultation. Thursday at 2. That night, I texted Rachel. Hey, can we talk sometime this week? No pressure. Just would be good to hear a kind voice. She called instead. Right away. Hey, she said softly. You okay? I cleared my throat. No, but I'm here. I told her everything. Not in detail, but enough. She didn't gasp. Didn't offer pity. She just listened. Then she said, You're not crazy, Ethan. You were trying to save something that she'd already decided to let go of. We met for coffee the next evening. Same booth, same chipped mugs. But this time, I didn't hold back. I think I stayed too long in something that stopped holding me a long time ago, I said. I just didn't want to believe it. Rachel reached across the table and rested her hand over mine. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you loyal. I nodded slowly. I was proud of that once. You still can be, she said. I didn't tell her I'd started the divorce. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. But I think she knew. Laura called a few times in the days after. Left voicemails. No apologies. No explanations. Just vague lines like, I think we need to talk. I let them go unanswered. She made her choice. And now, I was making mine. Rachel and I kept meeting for coffee. Walks. Long talks at the lake. Nothing romantic. Nothing heavy. But she made space for me. That was more than Laura had done in years. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing someone who didn't want to be caught. I was finally standing still, just long enough to realize I deserved more. Laura came back 4 weeks later. I knew the exact moment she arrived because I saw her car in the driveway when I pulled in from work. Same blue Corolla, same university parking sticker crooked on the windshield. She had left it in my name. I took a deep breath and walked into the house. She was standing in the kitchen, like nothing had happened. A grocery bag on the counter, her old sweatshirt slung over the chair. She looked up when I entered, surprised that I didn't flinch. Hey, she said, like we were just picking up after a long weekend. I hung my keys on the hook. You're back. Yeah, she said. The course ended early. Or I ended it early. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to give her the dignity of explaining on her own terms. She didn't offer it anyway. I didn't know where else to go, she added. You could have called. She looked down. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. She was right. The house was spotless. I had spent the last few weekends decluttering, boxing up things we didn't need, books we hadn't touched in years, pictures that meant something only to one of us. I left her stuff untouched, lined up in a neat row of banker's boxes in the spare room. She noticed them within minutes. So, this is really happening, she said, her voice hollow. It already happened, I replied. You just weren't here for it. We sat in the living room, opposite ends of the couch. The air between us felt tight, like a balloon no one dared to pop. I thought you'd be angry, she said finally. I shook my head. I was. But not at you. At myself. For pretending we were still in something that ended a long time ago. She nodded slowly, her eyes beginning to water. I didn't mean for it to go this way. You just didn't care enough to stop it. Silence. I made mistakes, she whispered. I leaned back, crossing my arms. We both did. I just don't think you wanted me anymore. You wanted a version of life I couldn't give you. I wanted space, she said. But I didn't expect to feel so lost. I nodded. I know that feeling. Difference is, I started doing something about it. I stood up and grabbed the envelope from the drawer. Handed it to her. What's this? She asked. The papers. I already signed. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She didn't open it. Just stared at the manila seal like it was radioactive. You're not even going to yell at me, she said, her voice cracking. Not going to call me names? I looked her dead in the eye. I don't need to. You know what you did. And if you don't feel bad now, you will when the silence kicks in. She looked away. For the first time in a long time, she looked small. Like a kid who just realized there was no going back. I let her stay the night on the couch. The next morning, I was gone before she woke up. Later that day, she called. Voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Eventually, she texted. I want to talk. Just once. I think I made a huge mistake. I replied hours later. We'll talk. Through the lawyers. Take care of yourself. I never blocked her. But I didn't answer again. Because sometimes the deepest closure doesn't come from screaming or begging. It comes from dignity. And walking away with it intact. 3 months passed. I signed the divorce papers in early spring. Laura never contested anything. I sold her my share of the house for less than it was worth. No drama, no bitterness, just a clean exit. She wired the money quietly. I wired back the difference. A week later, I got a thank you text. I didn't reply. Instead, I went outside and sat on the porch with a cold beer and my notebook. The one I used to scribble my way through the lonely nights. The last entry I wrote while she was gone read. I thought losing her would break me, but it just made space. It was true. The space she left was uncomfortable at first, like stretching muscles you didn't know had grown stiff. But after a while, it started to feel like something else. Like room. Room for peace. Room for Rachel. Room for me. Rachel and I kept seeing each other. Not in any whirlwind, movie magic kind of way. Just slow. Steady. A hike on Saturday mornings. A burger and root beer after church. Talking about old music and how neither of us really understood TikTok. She never pressured. Never pushed. We weren't defining anything, and we both liked it that way. She had her own healing. I had mine. But somehow, sitting next to her didn't feel like running from the past. It felt like finally sitting in the present. One night, she brought over a photo album. It was filled with pictures of her and her 3 kids over the years. She pointed out their smiles, their weird phases, the way her oldest once insisted on wearing a cape to kindergarten every day for a year. When she left, she looked at me carefully. You ever think about what comes next? She asked. I nodded. Every day. But for now, I'm just trying to be where I am. She smiled at that. Not a big one. Just soft. Genuine. Good answer. Later that month, I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned a trip. Not for Laura. Not for us. For me. Well, for my family. My real family. I used part of the house money to book a big cabin in Lake Tahoe for a week in July. I called all 3 of my boys, Ryan, who was finishing basic, Tyler, who worked in construction outside Bakersfield, and Will, who lived with his wife and 2 little girls down in San Diego. I want all of you there, I said. No excuses. Bring the grandkids, bring whoever you love. Just show up. Tyler asked, who's footing the bill? I am, I said. And don't argue. He laughed. All right, Dad. We'll be there. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Connected. Rooted. Enough. I didn't hear much from Laura after that. Once or twice I saw her name light up my phone, but I let it fade. From what I gathered through mutual friends, she was working late shifts at a new clinic near the edge of town, living alone in a 1-bedroom near the freeway. She still had the house, but no one to share it with. No porch talks. No grocery list stuck to the fridge. I imagined her scrolling through old photos sometimes. Maybe even pausing on the ones where we were smiling without trying. And maybe that was her version of closure. The last page of my notebook holds a final entry. There was a time I would have done anything to keep her. Now I'm doing everything I can to keep myself. Funny how peace doesn't always come from holding on. Sometimes, it comes from letting go. And for once, the silence around me didn't ache. It felt like home.